Hi, everyone. Welcome to Navigating Cloud Migrations, empowering your journey with Rackspace Technology and VMware. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rackspace and VMware and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm really excited to be your moderator for this special event today. But before we could get to today's awesome content, we do have a few housekeeping items you need to know about that'll help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you. So we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel, which you should be seeing right in front of you. At the end of the presentation today, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session to discuss some of the top questions that you ask as well. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be having. A browser refresh is the first thing to do if you've got audio, video issues, anything like that going on. If that doesn't work, let us know in that Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. All right, next, in the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, including a link to a survey on cloud migration that you'll want to check out, as well as a link to getting started with Rackspace. Now, that handout section there is right next to the questions tab if you want to click on that. There you'll also find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's vast library of printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the Actual Tech Media Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events, including probably some that'll interest you. So if you see something that looks good, hey, sign up today. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you have to be in attendance during the entire event to qualify for the prize, so keep that in mind. The official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in the handout section. And one of the best things about being on one of our Actual Tech Media webinars is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. And to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you today. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we're going to round up these questions, pick out the very best one and contact that prize winner. So lots of ways to win. And with that, everyone, it is now time to introduce you to our presenters and get to the main event. We have got three folks from Rackspace with us. They are Hannah Deuce, Director of Strategic Alliances for Rackspace, Edward Kerr, the Product Director, and Ryan Gibbons, a Solutions Architect with Rackspace. They are ready to go. I think, Edward, you have the mic, so the floor is yours. Take it away.
Happy to be here. Let's dive in and start by discussing the trends in the market driving migrations today. Starting with you, Ryan. What do you see as the most interesting drivers that are bringing customers to take their time and energy to make moves?
I see customers really looking to reduce their operations costs. They're looking to focus on business objectives. They're really wanting to hire and have their team focus on what brings business value and not really looking to maintain the infrastructure or spend the time and the resources and the capital maintaining a data center or the employees needed to run a data center floor.
Hannah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we continue to hear again and again from our customers just the need to do more with less. And so as you think about how they're going to execute these plans, how are they actually going to do that? We're continually advising and consulting and learning ourselves just the ways to be more and more efficient with what we do have and do it more quickly than we've been able to do in the past. And so as we'll talk about, variety of ways that we're executing on that and helping our clients through those challenges.
Yeah, I think personally, I see that there are two kind of main things that are causing customers to make these moves, because let's be real, that migrations aren't zero cost efforts. Not only do they cost actual dollars, but it exposes your company to risk. And so to make that kind of move, there needs to be something driving that. And I think everything that you guys are saying makes sense. And when you look at it from the lens of, like, say, people migrating out of their data center or repatriation, you start to really understand that the stakes are high, because if you repatriate, you're allegedly losing the cloud. We'll talk more about that later, because that might not be true, but you're losing a lot of features and a lot of the elements that make that cloudy experience desirable, allegedly. Um, and you're also talking about moving out of your data center, which, to your point, Hannah, is shifting from that CapEx, OpEx model and going from owning a thing to not owning a thing. And that's a very difficult thing to swallow. So, sorry. So, if we look back at these two use cases, why do we think they're happening? Like, why are customers, one, moving out of the data center and going to the cloud, both public and private? Or why are they even doing the reverse and leaving the public cloud and going back into private clouds? Hannah?
Huh, you're asked a double whammy there.
Pick
So I
one.
think a variety of reasons. I see the need for consolidation and simplification. People don't want to be in the minutia of managing a data center, and the challenge is, like, we're in 2023 right now, and it is radically different in the data center world than it was even last year. You see that with the demand increase around generative AI and just the need for data center space. So the ability to go manage those DCs and manage the long-term contracts and space and get the right locations, it has become a lot more challenging. So that's one reason that I think a lot of this is escalating. You've seen it escalate from COVID and just the need to get out of that hands-on requirement. And then it's funny because then you also see the repatriation aspect. And what we're seeing with that is there was a vast move out of the data center a handful of years back, where people did a lot of lift and shift type migrations, and they just moved it as quickly as they could to capitalize on that cloud first initiative or whatever that might have been, and didn't really do a lot of the work to take advantage of the public cloud's value. And so now, going back to do more with less, finding those right workloads for the right place for them to land. So,
Yeah.
Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think it's really interesting seeing customers kind of who took that cloud first approach that are now looking at, or especially the public cloud, but are now looking at how they get off the public cloud, because um, it's a lot of complexity to manage a public cloud. And if you're not careful, the public cloud is going to end up costing you a lot more than having dedicated resources. It's easy to have that cost sprawl, and it can blow up in really quickly. I see a lot of customers moving back to the data center and back to looking at doing a public cloud for those reasons. They are actually looking to cut costs from the public cloud. They are looking to simplify the infrastructure stack, because there are, the infrastructure as a service is great if you're taking advantage of it. But like you said, with the lift and shift, they're finding they moved it over to the public cloud, and it's now costing them more money to run the same workload. And so we see those workloads coming back, and we see them being smart and really going with a hybrid approach. It's like, okay, our databases need the resources and they need a more dedicated workload environment, and they're moving that way. And then, leveraging the fiber that interconnect we have throughout the country, they're able to keep the latencies low and keep the application spread across multiple data centers and platforms.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what we're seeing is a result of people having made decisions not because they had a particular pain point they wanted to solve, but because there was some mandate to do a thing. It's like, you've got to go to the cloud. It's destination
Yeah.
private cloud or bust. And that that's inherently problematic. And it'll kind of lead into the next topic, which is, how do you understand who are the right partners in this space to help you? And I think it all starts with understanding what the true drivers of change are. So, what are my security and compliance needs? Do I have any regulatory requirements? Is there a need for data sovereignty? What about physical security, data encryption? Then we go on to technical aspects, and you consider things like performance, scalability, interoperability, so on and so forth, and consider categories like financial and flexibility requirements, staffing and stakeholder involvement, and then, of course, testing, risk management, et cetera. So all of these things are legitimate reasons why companies might want to move them. Because my CIO said so is probably not the best reason to make multi-million-dollar business decisions, unless you're doing it out of self-preservation. Then that is a great thing, right? Like, if your CIO says to do it, you probably should, all jokes aside. But maybe just a little respectful pushback is like, is there other reasons that we should go to the cloud? And again, I think that is what we're seeing. So repatriation is a byproduct of people not having considered those things. But considering those things isn't easy. Like it's not always easy to understand the nature of our own problems. We're too in the middle of them. So
Mhm.
sometimes we need to bring someone in to have that kind of bird's eye perspective. So Hannah, as somebody who's really familiar with building good partnerships, like what would you look for in a partner in the migration space, and how does their ability to understand your needs factor into that?
Yeah, good question. So I think key to any partnership, regardless of kind of the type or the ecosystem you're in, is aligned aligned KPIs, aligned vision. So really understanding each other and what your end goal and outcome is of both partners. So getting to know each other, having that level of trust. You can't really build a partnership for whatever you're doing, a true partnership, without a level of trust there. So you need trust in each other's ability to execute on whatever that joint desired outcome and vision is. So that would be key. Like that's kind of what I look for, number one. Um, then defined targets. What are we trying to do and by when, and can we go move against those? So that way we know and we have something defined that we can come back to really track our progress and have we met those mutual objectives. So those are kind of two really fundamental pieces to building a strong partnership to go execute against desired outcomes.
And
Yeah, I think
Ryan,
a
when you're,
partnership.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Stepping on you. Yeah,
Hey,
no,
we're
I think
stepping on each other's toes, right? Like this is a good
right.
dance. Yeah.
So I think the partnership is the most critical thing. Like people go and look for, they call it a partner, but they're just a lot of times they think of them as just a hosting provider or just a invoice consolidation company or something like that. But finding someone who's a true partner who looks at your entire company and not just, oh, I've got this server or I've got this workload. They're really looking at like how does this fit within the company's strategic vision to meet their goals, 5 years down the road, not just what's are they trying to do today. A lot of times these companies looking to make a move are being pressured by the employees themselves. They've got developers who are wanting to, they want DevOps, they want to have control of their environments, which is what the cloud gives them. It's no longer this physical server that is shared amongst multiple people. You have the ability to carve out small pieces for a group or for an individual to do their work. And um, so trying it's the future, I think, is really um, it's not just a workload perspective of servers. It's really all encompassing of the company, of the talent that you have, the talent that you're trying to acquire, and uh, giving them the tools that they need to succeed and that they see as are important. Because I mean, the environments, if you look at where we were 10 years ago with the development versus now versus 20 years ago, I mean, it's drastically different on how we manage and deploy apps. In the enterprise space, it moves a little bit slower, but, you've got all these SaaS applications, you've got microservices, you've got companies that are looking to acquire new talent that are struggling because they are stuck on legacy, monolithic applications. And so trying to meet the needs of the company as they grow and give them the platforms that they need, it's more than just a lift and shift. It's more than just taking and modernizing an application. It's really all encompassing of all of that and making sure that what we're like, when I talk to customers, I try to find out why are you making this move? Why, like, what are you, it's not just money. It's not just because the CIO wants to, it's, there's a lot more underneath it that's driving it. And so trying to find that and really helping them build a platform um, that meets those needs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you both more. I think that what you guys are calling out is the fundamental relationship you ought to look for, which is to say that there needs to be a marriage between our understanding of customers' problems and our ability to execute and overcome those problems, technically speaking and business speaking, and all of those aspects, right? Like one example I think of is customer might come to you and say, well, we want to move to the cloud. And if you're a bad partner, you'd say, like, oh, no problem, we'll move you there. A good partner would say, well, can I understand why you want to move to the cloud? Not to challenge you, but because I want to make sure that when I do the migration from a technical perspective, I don't exasperate that problem, but rather solve it. So you might think, like customer says to you, I want to move to the cloud. You ask that question and they say, well, I want to introduce new cost efficiencies. So doing the migration in isolation isn't enough to solve that problem. Maybe we also need to talk to them about a TCO analysis or shifting from a CapEx OpEx model. And even just having those conversations to me demonstrates that the partner fundamentally understands your needs and understands how addressing those needs can be done on the back end as you go through with the migration. So, with that said, I think we've now talked about kind of what customers' problems are, but and where they might go. But what are some of the differences between those destinations, starting with the data center? Ryan, from your perspective, migrating out of a data center to the cloud, what are the options and why might you think each one is the best place for a customer?
Man, yeah. So, I mean, moving out of the data center, you have a lot of options, and it depends on how you're in the data center. Are you running the data center yourself? Are you renting a data center? Are you using a provider that is like co-locating your equipment? Kind of depending on what you have going on, depends on the route you would go. You know, the obvious choices. I think the most obvious choice that everyone always says is AWS, but you know, there's multiple hyperscalers out there, and then I think one that people don't think about when thinking about the cloud is a private cloud, and they tend to think of all the public options, but they don't think that they can operate the cloud on dedicated equipment, dedicated networking. That's all for them. That still gives them the flexibility that a cloud would give them. It really depends on the application and what, you know, again, the end goal, like you said, you know, we ask why, not to challenge, but to try to uncover what's driving it, what's truly driving it, so that we can find the right platform. Because, you know, if it's because your application is requires a ton of services and you don't want to manage your messaging queue anymore, you don't want to manage your database anymore, you know, you want to focus on the application, you know, moving to something that can provide that infrastructure as a service is going to be really important. And your hyperscalers give you that capability. They're allowing you to, you know, use a messaging queue where you're not managing the underlying queue. You know, so looking at what the platforms provide, the hosting providers provide, are extremely important. Sometimes you just need the flexibility to spin up and down VMs. You know, you need the ability to get something up and running, and then shut it down when you're done. It could be like a complete dev platform that you're trying to move out of a DC because your production's already in the cloud and you've got your legacy kind of staging environments or dev environments in your data center. And so you need more flexibility, and that could be the driving cost or the driving factor.
I actually have a Oh,
No,
sorry. I've actually got a follow up for you, Ryan, on something you just said. So, when you're considering these moves, um, is lift and shift an option anymore? I know we've kind of hinted at that. And if it's not really an option anymore, then what are the alternatives to a lift and shift in your mind?
right. So I mean, lift and shift will always be an option. You know, there's tools to make that happen. There's vendors out there to where you can back up and restore into the cloud. So that's always an option. You typically won't see any cost savings with that because, I mean, for the most part, moving something out to the cloud is going to require something a little bit more beefier just because it's on shared resources. It's virtualized now. Even though the virtualization has gotten really good, you still have to factor in for that. The you know, when you're looking to move to the cloud, any cloud, private or public, the best way is to really look at the application and how you can modernize that application to take advantage of that cloud. It could be, you know, dynamic auto scaling. It could be as simple as that, to where you can have compute power spun up and down as needed, or it could be a really complex migration to where I was talking about taking advantage of the infrastructure as a service. And so you're taking advantage of messaging queues that are being provided to where you're making API calls to your hosting provider to manage a messaging queue or an email service instead of having to run an email service yourself. Going that route is really your best bet. That's where the application is going to take the most advantage of the cloud. It's going to allow it to scale better, and it's actually going to reduce your cost. Like you're going to have costs spread out a lot more across all these different services, but you're paying for what you use at that point in the cloud, and so you're able to really can't think of the word I want to use right now. You're able to make the application a lot more efficient in the calls that it makes, and only pay for the services that you're using instead of running an email server 24/7 that might only send out, you know, a couple dozen emails a day. you can now take advantage of an email service to where you're only paying a few cents per email. And so you're able to
True.
scale those, you're getting efficiencies in the cost models from that.
Hannah, I actually have an interesting follow up question for you. So I think Ryan talked about the move into private clouds, but there's an interesting market phenomena going on right now where customers are going from public clouds back to private clouds, which is known as repatriation. How do you understand that and kind of what's driving that fundamentally? And what are some of the things you would consider if you were a company making that move?
Um, yeah, so it is kind of funny. We're seeing a pendulum swing. There's been a handful of reports recently around this, around, you know, SaaS companies in particular kind of hitting this point where the scalability that they got in the public cloud is not it's diminishing returns. And so there are some things that can make more sense coming back once they get to a certain scale. So I would think there's a handful of things to think about in this. And one we haven't really touched on is software. So, any kind of software licensing that you may be using and thinking about portability of that. There's some unique differences depending on who you're leveraging or things like that. And you're seeing a lot of shift in the market around maybe for example, VMware is moving much more to subscription based, and just thinking about portability of that and that's something that Rackspace has really looked at, is how we support that regardless of where it lands, and the way that we do that. So one big area that I've seen when working with customers looking to repatriate certain workloads, or entirely over the course of the next few years out of public cloud, has been performance. A lot of times it's around performance. It's not always cost. Cost is evidently, I like to think of it, cost is a driver, the need to do more with less, but it's more of an outcome. And usually there's some other piece in there outside of just the cost element. And a lot of what I'm seeing is performance. And Ryan kind of touched on this too, and just being able to drive certain levels of performance out of a private cloud due to the control that they have. And frankly, something that Rackspace has really built up over the years is that interconnectivity and the ability to connect and then drive some unique networking scenarios for high performant needs. And so we've been able to help solve for some of that as we dug in through our partnerships with some key partners like Dell and VMware, and leveraging tools that they have and expertise there, and really coming together as an ecosystem to help drive the performance required for those things. So I would say it's a combination of things. Cost is typically an element in there, but I'm often seeing performance as a hard requirement.
Yeah, I see a lot of it also.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, hey, we're
Yeah,
dancing
yeah.
again. We're dancing. That means that's a good
So
thing. I love it. I step on people's toes all the
I
time.
I see a lot of it also is you've got on the dedicated side, on the private cloud side, you've got vendors now that are seeing the move to public cloud, and they're innovating their software stack. They're including hyperconverged
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure. You can go with OpenStack and you can build out an environment that works just like the public cloud. You can get storage, you can get dynamic storage, you can get block storage, you can get object storage and everything else. VMware is offering their software defined data center, which is, allowing you to, create Kubernetes clusters via command line development tools. You're able to uh, use vSAN in a way that provides, storage to your VMs. It also provides file system storage, like a CIFS share or NFS. And so you're seeing the private cloud sector now catching up to what the public cloud has been offering, and you're able to get these dynamic natures um, that you only could get in the public cloud. You're getting that now in your private cloud. So you've got your dedicated hardware, you've got your reduced costs, you've got your performance capabilities now under control, but you're still able to deliver a dynamic fashion that you used to only get in the public cloud. You can now get in the private cloud.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I actually think leads into another point that I'd like Hannah actually to speak on. You've got a great relationship with VMware from a partnership perspective, and they go to market with the Cloud Smart kind of brand. What does that mean, and how does it address what Ryan just said? Because what he's essentially saying, right, is that leaving the public cloud doesn't mean the death of cloudiness. Like You're not abandoning cloudiness. There are alternatives to the public cloud that allow you to achieve the same outcomes. And partners like VMware or even Dell or other partners across the globe, they're all talking about the same things, but focusing specifically on VMware and your relationship with them. How do they see Cloud Smart and how does Rackspace leverage it?
Yeah. If we go back to what I was talking about on building a strong partnership, when we meet with VMware, we like couldn't be more aligned in that future vision. And really, I mean, it just all intermixed. Like VMware is talking about Cloud Smart because they're saying, hey, let's think about before we just lift and shift or move something somewhere. Let's think about the big picture and how to develop seamless kind of multi-cloud connectivity and create that orchestration layer that goes across wherever you need to run something, whatever that underlying platform is. So I really think we're speaking a similar language and trying to deliver the best outcomes to our customers in a very complex multi-cloud world. So there's all kinds of nuances depending on what you want to do and how to connect to them and create a strong hybrid or multi-cloud environment for an organization. So Cloud Smart is just thinking ahead and how do we create a holistic cloud versus thinking about clouds as individual namesakes within an ecosystem.
Hannah, that's an interesting point. And I think that when you look at the way Rackspace takes that and implements it into our SCDC platform, where we bring a level of automation, single click deployment of VMs through vSphere, where we leverage vRealize automation to help customers enforce policies, when we use our elastic engineering offers to help customers deploy NSXT and microsegmentation, we're unlocking the power of these kind of unbiased tools so that customers can deploy them not just on our private clouds, but consistently deploy them in their public cloud environments and in their own data center, giving them that kind of layer of consistency that makes it easier for them to manage those workloads. Now, as far as kind of what our next piece of this conversation is, we've talked about our partner ecosystem, the problems that customers are facing, and the way Rackspace goes to market in these spaces. But what are the things that, in our experience, in going out there with customers, we find customers generally get wrong when planning migrations and pitfalls that our audience today should be considering? We'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, I think the obvious one that we've already touched on several times is lift and shift. A lot of times they think that they can just take their workload and move it out there, and then all of a sudden they're going to be a cloud application and they're going to have all these great benefits. And the fact of the matter is a lot of times if you're going from a dedicated environment to a public cloud, there's going to be issues that you're not going to foresee. There's going to be scaling issues. There's going to be you're now going to a shared tenancy, and so you've got to make sure that not just compute, but you're going to have network. You're going to have disk things. You've got so many fine-grained controls to control the performance of the system that it might not be obvious that you need to be moving to you need to be flipping this switch versus another switch. And so getting it tuned and working right is important. I see the other thing is when they're running their cost models, they don't understand the manpower it takes to manage a cloud. Um, a lot of times they look at just the infrastructure costs and they'll be like, oh, we're paying X number of dollars over here for the dedicated stuff, and we can run it for half the cost in the cloud. And they move it over there, and now all of a sudden they've got extra bandwidth costs, they've got I/O costs, they've got all these extra costs that weren't factored into their original model. On top of that, they were able to manage their data center with maybe one or two people. Well, now those one or two people can only manage a fraction of what needs to be managed in the cloud, and it takes more specialized people, and it takes a lot more effort and time to keep those things running.
Yeah, great point. And I know that we have to wrap up. This was an amazing conversation, and we really appreciate everybody's attentiveness and engagement. But I just wanted to say not only thank you, but that as we kind of close out this conversation, I want to call to everybody's attention that a lot of the problems and concerns that we talked about today aren't things you have to wrestle with. Rackspace and partners like VMware have solutions in the marketplace. We have ways to help fund your migrations. We have methodologies and frameworks that we can leverage to effectively do that. We understand the nature of your problems for specific industry verticals, and we want to be a part of that conversation. So if you guys are interested in taking this next step with us, reach out to Rackspace Technology today, and we're going to be able to help you make the move to whatever cloud is right for your workloads. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time. Back to you.
All right, Josh, what a great conversation. So much good stuff there. I really enjoyed that. And we are ready now to get to your Q&A. We've got some fantastic questions coming in. And what I want to do first here, though, is I want to put up a poll question for you. And while we go through some of these questions, we're going to leave these poll questions up. We're going to go through a number of them here while we do the Q&A at the same time. So look at that poll. Are you facing any challenges or limitations with your current cloud solution that you hope to address through migration? Let us know how you're faring with that. While we get to our first question, we have got Edward and Hannah and Ryan on with us live right now, and they are ready to go, and I am ready to go, so let's get to it. Okay, first question from our attendees today. For any one of you that wants to handle it, as a business planning a cloud migration, what are some common challenges we should anticipate during the transition? Now, this is for any of you that wants to answer.
Yeah, this is Ed. I'm happy to step in. So I think some common challenges that businesses often need to consider is how they can take an existing application that may be monolithic in nature and transform that. Do you do that in place in your VMware environment today when you're moving it, say, to the cloud or wherever you're moving it? Or do you do that after the fact? What things you have to consider to determine what re-architecture looks like and what value that might present from a cost perspective. And just being able to see that before you kind of go down that path of committing to your C-levels is often one of the major challenges.
Okay. Great stuff. Absolutely. All right. So let's go to our next poll question then. Well, before we get to our next attendee question, lots of questions here. All right. Next, have you identified a time frame for migrating or adopting a new cloud solution? Again, let us know what your feelings are on that and when you're going to be doing this. So, next question for our experts today. Could you share a real-world example of a challenge an organization faced during their cloud migration and how Rackspace and VMware helped them overcome it? So we love case studies here, so this is a good opportunity for one of you to share one of those with us. Anyone want to take that one?
I'm trying not to dominate the conversation, but I'm happy to kind of step in.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have an offer called Elastic Engineering for VMware, where we kind of package together bundles of hours and in an agile manner work through a backlog of things. And we had a customer come to us who was kind of in the modernization step of their cloud journey, trying to figure out how they can take advantage of cloudy outcomes across a hybrid multi-cloud strategy. And one of the things was migrating from traditional firewalls and physical infrastructure to a software-defined NSX-driven kind of architecture. So we had to take those physical firewall rules, kind of update them in the NSX framework, and then create like the necessary templates and rules there, help them take advantage of things like microsegmentation and architecture, and then help them deploy those same kind of structures across multiple clouds.
Oh, excellent. Really good stuff there. All right, so let's get to our next poll question and then our next attendee question here. So next up is, how involved are you in the decision-making process for cloud solutions within your organization? So let us know what level you're at while we get to the next attendee question. Okay, so next up, and this also is a question that was asked by our attendee. Let's see, Laura here wants to know, what is the most common reason for repatriation from a cloud environment? Now, that was mentioned at the beginning. I don't remember if it was Ryan or someone else, but why do you find people are repatriating these days?
This is Hannah. I can jump in on this. I think there's a few different things. A couple that we're seeing like live right now have to do with overcoming latency challenges. So they literally need to be addressing those challenges. They're not getting what they need out of the public cloud, and so we're able to architect some unique scenarios that will help them drive the most value out of what they have. And then I would also say ballooning costs. That's another big one. So there are things that maybe they didn't anticipate when they first moved into the cloud. And at that point, it was okay. And now they've either grown to a place where I think I mentioned kind of the diminishing returns, and the cost is just beyond what they expected and can handle. So bringing back the workloads that make the most sense in a more steady state, perhaps, or need that certain performance basis that just is really expensive in a public cloud. Those are kind of the two key areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes maybe it's poor planning. It could be they're just shocked that they didn't really understand what the true costs are going to be. So that's it's more and more of an issue these days, actually. 100%. So let's get to the next poll question here. And this is, would you be interested in a personalized consultation with experts from Rackspace to discuss your specific cloud migration needs? And while we leave this up, let's get to another attendee question. Steve wants to know the following. Do powered down VMs count toward my total? He is looking at this for a disaster recovery scenario. What sayest thou, Rackspace experts, to that?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So yeah, they can and they can't. So most of the time, depending on the cloud provider, they're going to define whether or not there's charges for a powered down VM. Most of the time, for a powered down VM, there are going to be no charges for the VM compute itself, like the compute and RAM. But anything that is attached to the VM outside of that, you would still probably be charged for. So you're still going to have storage costs associated to that. And then anything else that was provisioned for that VM. So if you have, depending on the cloud provider, if they're charging for additional IPs or if they're charging for additional services that might be required for that, all those will probably more than likely still be charged. Again, this is really unique per cloud provider. So you're not going to be able to, just take a flat answer across the board there.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the answer depends, right? Like there are different ways to construct your DR solution. You can have an active, always hot solution where you are charged all the time. There could be pilot light solutions, which is what Ryan was describing, where you're only paying for the storage related and none of the services and or compute. But all of that kind of boils down to you as an organization understanding what the different business processes that are kind of overlaying that infrastructure, what the requirements are. So it's like, if it's an HR app, maybe you're like, I don't need it to be an active, always on because that's expensive. So we can throw that on like a pilot light type solution. But if you've got this like really business critical application that needs to run seamlessly even through an event, and the RTOs are so low that it justifies a conversation around completely active, always on solution, then yeah, you would pay for that. But what I would recommend is you look at that case by case, business process by business process. Rackspace does something called the business impact analysis, which is fairly standard. So you can Google that and kind of learn from yourself. But as far as what Rackspace does is we do exactly that. We go line by line, say these business processes and these RPO requirements that we gathered from your stakeholders justify this type of architected solution, and this is what the cost would be. But needless to say, the answer is just different depending on those inputs.
Right. All right. Thank you for the consultant answer. It depends, but the reality is that it certainly does depend. These are big decisions, and you have to go into it with your eyes open. So, related to what you just discussed, there's a follow-up here because I want to broaden that out a little bit. Another attendee wants to know, how does Rackspace provide strategic flexibility to businesses that are evaluating the option of repatriating their workload? Now, you just mentioned one way, but what are some of the other options that Rackspace takes us through or offers?
I actually missed some of that question. I hate to ask if you don't mind asking it
Oh
again.
yeah, no problem at all. So you mentioned some of the ways that Rackspace helps in terms of getting to the cloud, but to broaden it, how does Rackspace provide strategic flexibility to businesses that are evaluating the option of repatriating
Gotcha.
their workload? So essentially, just broadening the scope of your last answer.
Yeah, I mean, so when Rackspace is thinking about how we want to help customers make the move into, say, Rackspace data centers for private cloud solutions, we came up with a kind of market perspective called the AMP program. Think of it like, AWS's MAP program. It's not only a funding mechanism where we will help customers, find the financial resources needed to migrate to one of our clouds, but also it kind of entails all the technical diligence and processes and frameworks, tooling, and just general, like when do we modernize? How do we structure your observability strategy within this new cloud? What technology do we need to use to make sure that, your layer 1, layer 2 firewall rules are always migrated and in place and the migration is seamless, et cetera. So I think that's the kind of market perspective. And again, that's Rackspace AMP. And it's both a funding mechanism as well as a kind of technical framework that we live by and kind of go to the market with.
Great. Here's one that is related to a really important trend right now for businesses, and this is about cloud native, which so many companies are doing. For companies aiming to take advantage of cloud native features, how does Rackspace ensure a smooth integration of these capabilities during the migration process?
I think this would fall kind of underneath some of our logic engineering that was talked about a second ago. Rackspace, I mean, we have a team full of experts across all the different clouds. And so one of the things that Rackspace specializes in is application modernization, being able to take a kind of more monolithic or legacy application and make it more cloud native to add those features in. And so that's something that our teams can help with during a migration, is making that happen. As far as, ensuring safety and all that, that's all part of the execution. That's all part of the strategy ahead of time, planning, ensuring the test cases are there, and then following through on the execution of it.
Okay. So following up on that then, either Brian, you or someone else, can you provide an example of how Rackspace has done that, how they've helped a company leverage cloud native technologies to enhance scalability and innovation?
How they've used cloud native technologies?
Yeah, kind of a case study and how they've helped a company leverage cloud native tech to enhance scalability and innovate more.
So I mean, I think one of the cases that I always use when I talk about it is when you're looking at a lot of the losing my terms here. Looking at the services provided by the hyperscalers that allow you to not so much focus on running the service itself, whether it's a messaging queue, whether it's a database system, really focusing on leveraging the services, the platforms that they provide, and building off of those. And so by doing that, your teams aren't focusing on, is this server patched, is this server up, is this cluster in a safe state? They're focusing on, hey, my queries are running here, my data is being backed up here, and they're really focusing on the strategic vision of the application and the business, and not just the low-level execution. And so it changes the focus of the entire team, which can help elevate the application down the road and provide the benefits of going the cloud native. It provides some of the cost savings, the maintenance and operation savings.
Sure. Yeah, and I can expand on a specific example, although I'll have to be a little cryptic on the actual customer name because I'm not sure whether I can give it. But a major airline needed to migrate tier 1 systems, which comprise of over 40 applications from on-premise to AWS with like next to zero downtime, which is a common requirement we get with these kind of critical systems. And so what we ended up doing was containerizing all 40 of those applications. We codified them from an infrastructure as code perspective, and pipelined into AWS using up to 18, if I recall, cloud native services. As a result, it was a one-click deployment that had under 10 minutes of downtime, and gave them 100% coverage across that tier 1 application.
Wow, that's amazing to see that kind of an outcome. Okay, got time for a couple more questions that we'll get through here. So next up, can you elaborate on how Rackspace's strategic migration approach translates to improved ROI for businesses undergoing cloud migration? So this is a real bottom line question. How are they going to, improve ROI for a company that has employed Rackspace, that has started to implement Rackspace's solution?
Sure. So one, whether it's going into a Rackspace data center or going to AWS, we are obviously going into our own data center. We're the only person offering these kind of programs, but with AWS, we're Migration Partner of the Year. I think it was last year, right? So we know how to use map funding to your advantage. So that's one very direct dollars and cents ROI. And when you're not going into AWS or Azure, or one of those guys, you could use ours. So again, very direct return on investment. But more indirectly, and I think where you're really going with that is, what can we do to make sure that the work we do is not, labor plus, but rather labor minus. And so we're not looking to just migrate your applications in and, then leave you stuck with a heavy support laden model that can only operate with large amounts of ongoing fees, but rather we ask questions like, what can we automate in the process? So if we're going to move you into a new environment, we want to review your old environment and determine what are the kind of common activities that kind of dominated the support landscape, and then see if we can automate those things away using things like vRealize automation or orchestration, or any of the cloud native infrastructure as code technologies that we talked about for that airline example, so that we can make things easier for you as an organization. I think that's where the real return on investment comes in, is having a partner who's not just going to migrate you into some place and drop you there and say good luck, but who's going to look at your observability strategy, your automation strategy, your orchestration strategy across the board and make sure that you're set up for long-term success. I think that's the answer to the question, other than the obvious, we give you money, so to do it.
Yeah. And expertise and experience is just so crucial in the kind of scenarios that you're describing there, Edward. I mean, the people who've done this are the people who know best how to do that. So, all right, I think we got time for maybe one or two more. We have one that's a bit forward looking here. So the question is, considering the evolving landscape of technology, how does Rackspace ensure that the cloud strategy implemented today remains effective in the face of future changes? So in other words, to boil it down, how future-proof are the solutions?
I'm happy to chime in. Again, I find you guys probably get I'm the product guy. My answers are never straightforward. They're very consultant-like answers. But I think it depends, right? If we use, say, AI as an example, and we see where the industry is going, when you look at that, you could look at that and say, well, everybody just needs to adopt AI because that's where we're all going. But I think Rackspace is focused on making that a sustainable journey. So whether that's AI or your migration, the fact that we're looking at this from a what is the return on investment perspective, you could use AI to find out what the best pizza place is in your neighborhood, but is that the right use for all of that money and time invested? Or do you want a partner who's looking at that and making sure that we kind of diagnose, is the nature of your problem best solved by AI? Is the nature of your problem best served by migration without modernizing the architecture? Or do we need to modernize the architecture? And is that kind of consideration, that economic kind of perspective where business and technical outcomes marry, it's what makes these things, I wouldn't call them future-proof, but last a lot longer than they otherwise would, because there really isn't a way to get to a 100% future-proof solution, but we can make decisions last longer than they would have otherwise by making sure we're actually solving the right problems with the right tools. And it's that level of diligence that Rackspace brings to the equation that I think will get you there.
Great. Okay, final question for the group here today, and this is a good one to finish up with because it deals with post-implementation issues. So, can you share some insights into the ongoing support and services Rackspace offers post-migration to help businesses stay competitive? So, after they've chosen Rackspace, what do you do in terms of follow-up?
that's kind of what.
Yeah. Go for it.
Go ahead, Brian. You can add on to it. We've all got an answer. That's kind of our bread and butter, if you will, in what Rackspace has been built on and that fanatical experience. So, as we go from day one to day two management and operations, you get a team of folks, obviously through supporting the environments, as well as, you think customer success and having a lead on that. And then pre-sales who's come alongside of you in the process, kind of all still huddled around the customer and helping to have a good ongoing experience. So, that's kind of a short answer to it. There's lots of nuances and lots of different ways that we handle that depending on the nature of the business. And, if you imagine our customer base, many of them are multi-cloud. So you've got different pools of talent that are supporting these customers dependent on the environments and the way that they're all speaking and connected to each other. So, Brian, why don't you add on any other comments to that?
Yeah, you summed it up really well. It goes back to where Rackspace really focuses on creating a partnership with the customers, and it's not just taking the business and moving on, but it's making sure that the business stays healthy and that it continues to work. Our AWS customers have access to Cloud Health to ensure that their costs are being controlled. Our dedicated customers will have access to account teams to help ensure their hardware is up to date and patch and everything else. And then all of this is backed by the Rackers who provide the support across all the hardware and software and clouds out there. We support AWS and Google and Azure, and we have a network security specialist. We have a security operations center that runs 24/7. And so it doesn't just stop once the workload gets moved into one place. It's continual support and that partnership over the years to make sure that we're delivering what the company needs.
Yeah, and I will say, it's not just about providing those services on a destination platform, but providing them seamlessly across multiple destination platforms. I think that's where we go back to the VMware kind of cloud smart versus cloud chaos type distinction, which is, how do we provide these services across people who have AWS workloads, private cloud workloads that are VMware based, some OpenStack. And that's where the work that I primarily do from a product perspective is designing the kinds of cloud management UIs that allow you to enroll in all of Rackspace services seamlessly across all of those clouds, or getting initial health checks on your resources regardless of where they're at. Now, obviously, we're not going to replace the native control panels, but we provide you with that first pane of glass, not a single pane, but a first pane of glass. And then doing the same for things like networking with data freedom and making sure that, we're managing those costs effectively. Like we could set up the network connectivity without ever thinking about how much money it's going to cost you to egress in and out of ingress out of AWS as an example. But wouldn't you rather have a partner who is thinking about that and then uses something like data freedom to reduce those egress fees by 80%? And so it's not just about the day two services being there, it's about them being designed well and targeted for that multi-cloud experience that many people who aren't just born in the cloud, like in the last 5 years, those applications, like how do we manage them effectively is really where Rackspace brings its value, I think, today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Such important information. And I want to thank you, Edward and Hannah and Ryan, for putting together just a fantastic presentation and for all the knowledge you imparted here today, for your insights in the Q&A. We appreciate your time so much. And thanks for being here. And that was such an awesome presentation to have, and such timely information today. So with that, folks, everyone, we are just about done here. I'm about to cut you loose, but I do have one more piece of business before we go, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. As I mentioned in the beginning, you have to be present for the entire event to be eligible for the prize. And we do have a winner today. The winner of this $250 Amazon gift card is Anand Medalla from Georgia. Congratulations to you, Anand. We'll be in touch to get you your card ASAP. And with that, everyone, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rackspace and VMware for making this event possible. And thanks as always for spending part of your day with us. And for your great questions. We really appreciate your engagement, and we're happy to be on with you today. I certainly was, and I hope you enjoyed your time here. Well, that's it for now. You can get back to the rest of your day, and I hope you have a great one, everyone. We'll see you next time.